We're driven by the search for better. But when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. Leveraging over 140 million qualifications and preferences every day, Indeed's matching engine is constantly learning from your preferences, so the more you use Indeed, the better it gets. Join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Just go to Indeed.com/Blue Wire right now and support our show by saying that you heard about Indeed on this podcast. That's Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed.
And welcome back to another episode of the California Golden Bearcast. It's been a few months since we've taken a little hiatus. Andy and I needed the break. But if you've read the caption, the title, the preview, whatever, Andy is not here. It's me alongside some dear friends and, of course, fellow members of Right for California, Nick Krantz and Avi Kunath. How are you guys doing?
I think we were all just waiting on bated breath for the April 1st men's basketball contractual deadline, and now we're ready to celebrate.
Yeah, it's very exciting to be able to usher in more of the same.
It is true. We recently celebrated by our friend Ben's Twitter handle. He tweeted out that we have just celebrated it said happy Mark Fox is coming back for another year day, which was April 1st. So it wasn't a joke. It wasn't April Fool's. It is hilarious how it worked out that way, but it's not a joke.
Right
but for now, yeah. But we do have to talk about basketball for a little bit because we didn't really talk about how the season ended and all that. So just a forewarning, Andy and I will have a podcast out hopefully later this week or early next week about all the news that we missed over like the last 3 months. And we'll talk about all of that and all of the fan questions and so on. But for this, it's just the three of us talking about basketball. And then, of course, spring football and our predictions and such moving forward for the month of April. So it's a little bit more, it's like half sad news, half happy news. So we'll start with the sad news first and we'll get that out of the way. But we got to talk about the men's basketball season, right? Mark Fox will be returning as the head coach. We didn't get an official announcement on his return, but since they didn't relieve him of his duties and his contract year, quote unquote, restarts every April 1st, it makes sense financially that he's back. Doesn't make sense to fire him post that contract renewal or the new year of his contract. Some news regarding that was Knowlton, or AD, making some conflicting statements over a 2-week span. An article by Connor from the SF Chronicle had him saying that they were looking actively at a contract extension, and then Knowlton had an interview with Jeff Ferrato of the Cal Sports Report, and he said that he was misquoted and that they weren't actually looking at a extension, but that all coaches got a 1-year extension on their contracts due to the pandemic. We still don't know some of the details regarding how that extension works, but that's just an addendum. The Bears currently will have a full roster despite losing 3 seniors heading into next year. That's including the 2 incoming freshmen. The Bears finished the season 12-20, 5-15 in conference, lost in the first round of the Pac-12 tournament. And out of the 2 incoming freshmen, one is an international player and one is from IMG Academy, who also does not have any stats from his senior year from the best of my research because apparently he was injured. So that is there as well. So, gentlemen, how would you rate is the wrong word here, but what is your diagnosis of 3 years of Mark Fox basketball and the impending 4th year in about 6 months' time?
I don't want to say a heavy sigh covers it, but I think for most of the Cal fan base, that's might be the extent of the time that they spend thinking about men's basketball. Um, Meanwhile, I've produced a couple columns over the last few weeks that I'm probably in danger of rehashing verbally here on the podcast. But you know, there's if the athletic director, if Jim Knowlton is being honest in his assessment that like Mark Fox is the guy to turn Cal men's basketball around, I don't know what sort of objective measurement he can point to say that, like a piece of evidence that we can get different, better results from Mark Fox on the basketball court. I just don't see any evidence at all that anything would be any different, no matter how much time he's given. So it's more a question of like, is there some sort of subjective off-court feelings ball reason that we can imagine that Mark Fox might be able to turn Cal men's basketball around? Or are we just waiting until the athletic department comes to the same conclusion that the fans, the stats, the evidence available to us has already shown and borne out over time?
Yeah, I think it's hard to really make a calculation on what the Cal Athletic Department is thinking when it comes to basketball, because, as we know, the program is still in significant debt, and the basketball team has not made revenue. So, in the last couple of years, it seems like we have made a concerted effort to prioritize the football program at all costs with whatever limited resourcing we have, and deprioritize other sports. That's just based off of the decisions the team makes, with the hiring of White King on a very cheap contract, relatively, with a very strange buyout. And then the Fox contract basically is much cheaper than both of those. So we are kind of getting the results that we should expect with that contract.
Is it actually cheaper? I thought we paid White King $1 million a year and Fox like 1 point something.
Yeah,
million a year.
Fox's contract actually increases yearly too.
Sorry, the buyout. Isn't the buyout less?
Well,
yeah, the
doesn't
buyout's
matter
less,
unless we actually pay it.
That's true. That's also a factual statement. Yeah.
Yeah. So technically, we're less on the hook to like let him go, but we're still paying the White King buyout, which I think ends this year, if I remember correctly. So
I don't know what I mean. We don't know what how the buyout was in terms of like how the payment structure worked.
Right.
So
yeah, I think we're on the hook for most of it, if not all of it. That's one of the reasons we took our time to fire him to fire White King when it was clear that he was not producing and he was basically driving away season ticket holders. But now the basketball team is kind of in a place where it's kind of in net neutral. You don't want to make a decision on hiring a new coach unless you know you can support that coach and provide him with the resourcing he needs to succeed at the next level. So it seems like Knowlton is in a place where he has not really done his due diligence with regards to who could be a good candidate here. Um, or he has and has found no one interested based off of what we can offer. And that leaves us in a tough place, like where we don't rarely can't afford like a Dennis Gates or a Todd Golden. And we just are kind of left thinking, who can we get at like a bargain price who can succeed and thrive?
Yeah. Couple comments on in response to that. One, Mark Fox has indeed benefited from the fact that Wyking Jones already drove off all of the season ticket holders. So now there's nobody left for him to drive off. So consistency year over year. Um, I'm trying to figure out the economics of hiring a new basketball coach, just because I. It's true that like if Cal is competing with another Power Five program for any up and coming mid major coach who's hot on the market, for example Todd Golden, I'm sure we weren't going to be outbidding Florida, and similarly Dennis Gates this year we weren't going to be outbidding Missouri. So the key for us is finding somebody who's has an upside profile, either a year ahead of schedule or somebody who isn't going to be hired by a Power Five conference. For example, we were all screaming for Dennis Gates in prior seasons as sort of an up and coming guy. You have to just identify these people ahead of time, because as crummy as Cal's finances are, we can still double, triple, quadruple the salaries that a lot of these guys are making at mid-major conferences. So it's about like having an ounce of foresight, an ounce of creativity in finding somebody, and which honestly doesn't take all that much. Like we've joked internally, and I'm going to joke externally now. Jim Knowlton, you can have my KenPom password. I can give you that data, and we can help identify a mid-major coach who has shown the slightest bit of creativity or success at building a program. Basketball as a sport is maybe the most like data-driven sport, certainly the most data-driven college sport that exists out there. You don't need to rely on how well somebody comes off in an interview or whether or not the search firm brings them up to decide to make a hire. You can just decide like, hey, this guy shoots a lot of threes. Maybe he understands modern basketball.
And that kind of brings me to the second point, which is, are we sure that the athletic department and the university aren't prioritizing like things that UC Berkeley cares about, which is graduation rates and academics? And based off of all the communications, it seems like that is still top of mind, which it's obviously good to graduate athletes, but in a sport like basketball, so many athletes leave early that it kind of leaves you variable to the whims and needs of whatever class you get and whatever talent you get. But it seems like the priority is still to have like very high academic standards and good graduation rates, and that's a thing that's going to come in conflict with fielding like a really competitive basketball program in general. Like it would be nice to have those things, but I think we have to really reconsider like what our approach is in terms of like hiring a coach, because Mark Fox, he's doing good with the graduation and academics and all that stuff, but it's not leading to winning basketball.
Yeah,
I mean,
I think you're right, Abby.
I mean, just to piggyback off of both of what you guys are saying, like some of the Knowlton's quotes from that article with Jeff Ferrato, right? That I just kind of quoted and like copied the highlights into the article for Right for Cal, and I have it pulled up here. It's some of the key points. Knowlton said that COVID-19 contributed significantly to the challenges that the basketball program has faced, but it doesn't change the bottom line. Are we disappointed with where we finished? Yeah, you bet, Knowlton said Thursday, just as NCAA tournament was beginning play, that this is where we want to be playing. He also talks about the athletic department is moving forward with plans to build a dedicated practice facility, but the timetable for that project depends on the success of raising money to fund the building. And if you followed Cal basketball for long enough, you know that this practice facility schedule, plan, dream, move, whatever you want to call it, has been in the works for probably like 10 years or so and hasn't seen an inkling of it being moved at all. So yeah, that would be, that's probably pretty huge. And then also, this is what Knowlton said when he talked about the Mark Fox extension. He said, "We're not talking about a new contract right now. I think someone reported I was working on an extension. It was that I gave every coach a year," which is weird because he's directly contradicting his own quote. Like, it wasn't like sources heard. It was like in Connor's article, it said like Knowlton said that. Yeah, so it's a really weird situation. And then there's two more things that he says here. Obviously, I'm very cognizant of fans wanting to see better. He said the thing that fans have to remember is when Mark Fox took over, we had just completed the 2 worst years in our history from a men's basketball perspective, which I think most fans go, yes, we know. We were there. If any, and I tweeted this out on the Golden Blocks Twitter handle, and you can quote me on it. But I was like, dude, we were fans before you became the athletics director, and we'll be fans after you're the athletics director. You don't need to tell us that it was the 2 worst years of our program. We all watched it unfold in real time.
10 years is a long time, Rob. He's here for 7 more years.
We watched one of those years unfold before he was even the AD. So I think we know.
Dick Cutchin fans, stand up.
God.
Know.
Sorry, one last thing I wanted to, and then Nick, you can go. This is the one that like it kind of goes on with what Avi said and what you said about maybe there's stuff behind the scenes in like regards to maybe not just what goes on the basketball court, but what off of it. He says 8 or 9 years ago, we had a 30% graduation success rate for basketball. That is not acceptable. So it just, Knowlton said, so it wasn't just you're going to come in and all you have to do is win some basketball games and everything's going to be solved. You've got to win in the graduation success rate in the academics. You've got to get the right student athletes here, and you've got to get all of those things working together so that we can have an exceptional program, which is kind of weird to be pulling up graduation success rates from 8 or 9 years ago when it has no bearing. That's 8 or 9 years ago is 1, 2,
it's Monty.
3 coaches. Yeah, 3 coaches before this current coach. So, like, I don't know. Like, sure, like graduation success rates are great, but if guys are leaving for the NBA or if they're going professional, like, wouldn't you call that a successful basketball program? That's just my take on what basketball as a sport and playing at the next level is supposed to be. But I can understand the academic side of it, but it's just weird that he pulled out a quote about APRs from close to a decade ago.
And I'd like to see the numbers, I guess, that we're really dealing with right now, because to be clear, I have no doubt that because that's what Cal has prioritized in a variety of ways, both verbally and like in the contracts that we now write for our coaches, I have no doubt that the guys on the roster are doing quite well academically. Having said that, Grant Anticevich graduating this year was like the first dude to serve out his entire eligibility at Cal since like Kingsley Okoro. Most of that has to do with the sheer wreckage that Viking brought upon the program, where like everybody that was in the program before Viking left and everybody that Viking brought in left before finishing. But like, so yeah, I guess I'll give Mark Fox credit for stabilizing the roster, but it's not like, we were great shakes before that. So I don't know. Ultimately, what I see this all as is this central tension that Cal has where we like to pretend that what we really care about is academics and graduation and student athlete experience. But, at the end of the day, this is a revenue athletic department that's trying not to lose money, that has to respond to its customers. And so when push comes to shove, you have Mark Fox talking about how results are unacceptable in the newspaper because he can't say to his customer base, yeah, like finishing 10th or worse in the Pac 12 every year is what we strive for. Um, and honestly, like if Cal's attitude is that men's basketball is just another non revenue program and we're going to treat it as such, I would appreciate the honesty and then I'd know what I'm getting into. Um, I speculated a couple of weeks ago that that's basically where this program is now, unless and until they can hire somebody on the cheap who manages to revive things. So we'll see how long we're sort of treading water at the level that Viking Jones left the program behind at.
Yeah, one thing just on that note is, yeah, I mean, they covered most of the academic stuff, but I think with the COVID situation and Knowlton talking about COVID kind of wrecking like the Cal basketball program. I mean, what was Cal during COVID? What was our record? Like we were like at 500 or just under it
I think we won 3 conference games.
in 2020.
Yeah, because we won 7 the year before. We won 3 last year, and then we won 5 this year.
Right. So, like even before COVID, like we were not like making headway. Like I think the thing Knowlton keeps on hanging his head on, which in all his email correspondence with fans, is we beat Stanford in the last game before COVID was canceled. And apparently now the judgment for this program is beating Stanford, a middling Pac 12 program, which hasn't done anything in recent memory outside of one Sweet 16 run. And I mean, it's nice to beat Stanford, obviously, but if that's all we're going to judge basketball on, then it doesn't seem like Knowlton has a good understanding as to what really matters basketball wise. And then with COVID, like, it's weird to make the excuse about Cal basketball not having like the resource or the practice facilities. Like, it's not like football where you have to have like a dedicated place to play. You just need a hoop and like a ball, and like you need to go outside and like shoot 3-on-3s and do like all your drills. There's not like, this is kind of a thing where Cal basketball is just, and the athletic department have kind of limited themselves. And like they're thinking like they can, there's plenty of places to practice in the meantime and find space to do that, but they've never really put in the effort to do that. I mean, like Stanford had most of the same restrictions as us, and their women's team won a national championship. So I don't know. I mean, it just feels like we're pasting over things just because it's easy to do that.
Yeah, I mean, if there
on another kind of cynical note, I feel kind of bad saying this, but like one of the things that we've been kind of hearing a lot following the COVID year is how great everybody's been doing academically, like with graduation success rates and everybody's eligible. And the kind of hidden reality behind all that is during the COVID year, everybody passed every class because like functionally like every college across the country decided that failing people during a pandemic was unfair and cruel, which I think is the right decision ultimately. But I don't think that like all of the like grades and eligibility rates that every school, like every program at every school across the entire NCAA racked up like record eligibility rates, graduation rates, GSR rates, any measure of academic success, because functionally everybody passed every class regardless of whether or not they earned it. So when we hear the athletic department sort of crowing about how great they're doing academically, I don't know if that means a whole lot. Like I don't know. Kudos to the players for getting it done, but I'm not going to incline to give the athletic department credit for essentially what was the circumstance of the pandemic.
Yeah, just one more thing on that is, I mean, this is something that's bugged me since, Tedford, like just this notion that a coach is responsible for the academic success of a program. Like this is all dependent on the university's like support of the athletic department. Like they need to have academic support staff. They need to have learning institutions like dedicated tutors. And that wasn't there during like the 2000s. Like that's the reason like our graduation rate went to the pits. We had no support staff and we had no real institutional support for the program outside of like the bare bones. And that just came in like because we were spending all our money trying to build the athletic facility. That's where like all of our money and resourcing was going. But now that support staff is there and they deserve the lion's share of the credit, not the head coach. Like
Well,
it,
and at the same token, at the same time that we brought on board all of these academic resources within the athletic department, was also the same time that we started including major um, academic related incentives in our coaching contracts, which, you know, I guess it's good. I'd rather, spend money to guarantee that the coaches are supporting the academic progress of their students. Like, it's probably better that like our football coaches and our basketball coaches are told you get this bonus if your players stay eligible and graduate, so that they're not like, I don't know, encouraged to tell them you better show up for this practice at 5 a.m. or you're off the team. I don't care that you have a midterm the next day. But also, like, if you're literally paying a coach to graduate his players, then I'm not really inclined to give that coach any credit for graduating his players. Like, it's something that should be part of the job regardless. Shouldn't need an incentive to do it.
Yeah. I mean, the thing for me with that statement, and this all comes full circle, right? Is how many times on Cal basketball broadcast this year did we hear? But Mark Fox has the team playing real hard. They really play hard, and that's the one thing that bugs me, regardless of what sport I'm watching. Collegiate, pro, does not matter. Playing hard isn't a positive trait. Playing hard should be a guaranteed baseline of being an athlete. And on top of that, most of the guys, not most. I mean, I talk to the basketball guys, I talk to the football guys all the time. I have not met a single one ever, ever, that did not want to give it their all when they played the sport. For some of these guys, they know this is the peak of their athletic career. Like, and they're not going to let that go. Some guys are more divas about it, but even the guys that are divas off the field will still play their hardest on the field. Like they're that competitive, all of those guys. Otherwise they wouldn't be playing at this level. Which is why I absolutely hate that that's like. But at the same time you realize like they really must have nothing else to talk about if that's the only thing that they can keep bringing up. So like that's I mean the all of what you guys said is right. And the COVID thing is like, it's weird to me because the harshest COVID restrictions, sure, there was like was it Knowlton or someone else that said like when like Cal basketball, like they weren't even allowed to practice with a ball, like they were practicing outside, like on an outdoor court without a ball. Like that's the city of Berkeley restrictions that were on it. So like, sure, I get that, but those restrictions probably were a lot lessened after the 2021 or 2020-2021 season. Like the 2020-2021 like preseason, sure, that was probably when the restrictions were the heaviest, and it was probably the hardest to play. Mark Fox even talked about like how the team wasn't able to eat together, so there was no like team bonding, and so on. But I'm confused as how that affects this year when there's another offseason in between the two that wasn't really derailed by COVID at all. Like
well, the
we
thing
didn't have.
is, like in the start of the season, Cal played their best basketball, right? Like
I mean,
they,
did we? But we lost our first game to UCSD.
we did, but like after that, we still like we were like over 500 for a decent part of the season. I know it's the easy part of the schedule, and but
Yeah,
we did play a couple of teams pretty well. I think this year this was like a chance for like Fox to distinguish himself and show that like he could produce like a capable offense, and it seemed like he had some of that going with Andre Kelly. But once Kelly got hurt, there was like no backup plan, right? So I think with the playing hard thing, um, I mean, we play hard, but we play slow. Like, so it's like it's kind of a back and forth sort of thing, right? Where we're just like, okay, here we don't have a great amount of talent. Let's minimize the number of possessions. Let's play slow at ball, and let's try and grind out wins. And we grinded out 4 wins in the last 2 months of the season. So I'm not really sure what this is getting you other than like very close competitive losses that make Mark Fox look like the team is playing hard, but it's just because we've minimized variance and we've made it every game a rock fight, which is not super exciting and not really compelling to watch.
Yeah, so I'll give you guys a little free preview of what I'm going to be like next year for basketball. So we're now 3 years into Mark Fox's program, and every year has been more or less the same, which is that Cal has been last in tempo in the Pac-12, one of the slowest Power 5 teams in the country. We don't have a ton of ball handlers on offense, so we tend to like funnel the offense through the one or two guys who can sort of kind of create their own shot. We take a lot of 2-point jumpers. We don't really look for very good shots, and we're trying to focus on playing defense. For maybe the first time under Mark Fox next year, we're going to have like this really sort of unique roster full of dudes who are like 6'6", 6'7", 6'8", lots of length, lots of size. What we should do is we should be playing some sort of like high pressure, disruptive defense, send these guys with their gigantic limbs at every opposing offense, try to disrupt, try to create turnovers, try to get out in transition and run a little so that we can attack a defense before it gets set, because we're not going to have the ball handlers or the passers probably to break down a set defense. We should be doing something unique, something different, rather than just the same boring Mark Fox 1990s basketball style that will, eventually go 10-20. We won't do any of that. And so I will constantly, I will try to bite my tongue and not make the same complaint in every post-game report, and probably fail a lot, because like I'll be watching like dudes who could be really interesting defensively not be given the free reign to do anything interesting on the court. And that's going to be a real bummer.
Did Nick just say that he wants to run the Louisville Press? Is that what I just heard? If that's the case, didn't we just have a coach that might be able to coach that? Should we rehire Wyking Jones? Is that what you're telling me? With this roster, we should rehire Wyking Jones for his coaching philosophy.
If I thought that Wyking Jones could teach it, yes. That's the problem. Is it turns out that if you don't have Rick Pitino, you're going to have trouble teaching the Louisville Press. And for the same reason that Wyking wasn't capable of teaching the press is why we won't get Mark Fox doing something different, because, coaches know what they know. They're comfortable with what they're comfortable with. And so they do the same thing. And which is what makes the unique coaches unique. Either they have something that they're so good at that they're going to succeed regardless of the fact that they do the same thing every year, like AKA Mike Leach and his offense, or like Tony Bennett and his pack line defense, or they're coaches who are willing to expand their skill set and change with the times and make any new innovation work for them. Like, Coach K embracing the one and done era, or like Jim Harbaugh remaking his offense, and finally beating Ohio State this year. There are guys who are willing to learn from their mistakes and get better, or there are guys that are so good at one thing that they succeed regardless of the fact that everybody knows what they're doing. And then there's a whole bunch of guys who do something mediocre and just keep doing it every year, and you know what it is, and it's not going to change, and you can either accept it or you can tune out, and most Cal fans have tuned out.
It comes down to accountability. Like, I don't think I think Fox came into the season and felt pretty secure he would be back next year. Um, it seemed like Knowlton and Fox were on the same page to begin with. That this is still a COVID remnant year where everything is like hampered by tennis balls and tennis courts or whatever the team was doing. And he coached that way. I did not seem to feel any pressure all year outside of maybe the Stanford game, which he did seem to coach decently well. Um, but yeah, outside of that, like there was no pressure on Fox to really like change up who he was. It'll be interesting to see him this year because this is probably the make or break year for him. Because if he doesn't coach well, then he is a lame duck. And I mean, I can't see an environment where we would extend him if he were to produce the same results. Um, it'll be interesting to see if he changes that up too, if his strategy changes with that sort of thing on him, like, or is he just like content to ride his way out to retirement? Because there's really nothing Fox has shown at his time in Cal that seems to indicate he wants to be here long term. Like he is doing the bare minimum recruiting wise and transfer portal wise to try and stock up this roster. Like basketball is not a hard sport to turn over and be a good team at. Like we should be able to find 3 or 4 talents every year that could potentially at least get you back. And like basketball is like a big thing in the Bay Area. Like Cal has had a decent team, at least average, for most of our lifetime.
So, I guess the one thing I'd push back on is, I, to Fox's credit, like he seems to identify the guys he should be going after. Like you can see the recruits that he offers. You can see the transfer portal guys who say like, "Oh yeah, I've heard from Cal." It's just that none of them ever come here, and maybe that's like he gives them a phone call and says, "Hey, you want to come to Cal?" And they say no, and he says, "Oh, okay, good to know," and doesn't call them back. I have no idea how hard he works to try to get these guys to commit, but
I was also a fixture of his staff, right? Like his
yeah,
staff is pretty old. Like Trent Johnson, like this, he's was a coach what 15 years ago, 10 years ago at
yeah.
this point. Like we have
Retired and is now the CSUN coach. Like that's like the crazy part to me.
exactly like I don't know any of the assistants that well, but we don't have an ace recruiter on our staff or anyone who's like really
Well,
hitting their trails.
Coach
Yeah, but
Francis is the one that's like should be the recruiter,
like
and that's what
it
he
was
was
so
known.
darkly hilarious last year. Like we went into the off season like we're gonna find ourselves a transfer point guard. So it's like, oh, Cal has offered the best transfer point guard. Transfer point guard goes somewhere else. Oh, like Cal has offered the second and the third best transfer point guards. They go somewhere else. Cal is offering literally any transfer point guard. They all go somewhere else. Cal is offering bottom of the barrel JC transfer point guards. Point guard goes to Buffalo. Like we're out there trying to get these guys, and we fail at every single one of them. So
Yeah,
I don't,
which seems to indicate
I
something
don't.
else is going on, or something is
Yeah,
going on that's getting
where the
lost in
malfunction
translation.
is in recruiting, I don't know, because Mark Fox doesn't talk to anybody. But like the inability to recruit is comical at this point.
And like, there's really no excuse. Like, I mean, even White King, like for all his faults, did provide like good talent, and he was just so bad that like it didn't stay very long, right?
Yeah, it's an interesting illustration of coaching matters because I think you know Viking had on average more talent and produced absurdly worse results than Mark Fox did.
Yeah, I
But
mean, for
you
all
know,
the knocks that Monty got recruiting wise, like Montgomery, like in terms of production quality wise, like all of them produced at a 3 to 4 year level and were around the program to provide consistency and like stayed for most of Kwanzoo's term as well to keep that talent going when Jaylen Brown left.
It is kind of hilarious looking back at it now that like if I were to just shrink this all down to very simple comparisons, like Mark Fox is a lesser version of Monty. like towards the later years. Like he doesn't recruit as well as Monty, or he doesn't recruit like Monty did towards the end, but he definitely still knows his basketball stuff. But just coaching, quote unquote, should pay off, and that's what some people say, right? Is that like Andre Kelly and Lars Tiemann, like you got to toss that up to coaching. Do you toss that up to coaching, or do you just toss that up to age? Like I don't know. But then you look at like Konzo and Viking, like they went fully on into recruiting. They didn't really maximize their talent in terms of coaching, but the recruiting floor was so high that we were able to mask some of that. But yeah, I mean the coaching negative for Viking was so low that it didn't mask the talent that was on the court. But
it's sort of like everything on a spectrum where like Monty
Yeah.
was a mediocre recruiter, but he was a solid defensive coach and an elite offensive coach. Konzo was an ace recruiter and an excellent defensive coach, but a pretty disastrous offensive coach. Viking was bad at everything. Mark Fox is a solid defensive coach, but he can't do anything on offense, and his recruiting is, well, we covered that.
Yeah,
it's
and
unique.
I think it's just I don't want to delay labor like over Mark Fox's exhausting '90s basketball, but there just isn't really much to sell a recruit on that would excite him. It's not modern. There's nothing unique about it, and it's probably going to hurt your potential to like be an NBA player if to be like hamstrung in that sort of old school college offense. And it's going to hurt your chances to like be in the tournament. Like that's the reason Matt Bradley's gone left, and like we need to have an offense that is modern. Like as much as like Calvin's basketball struggles, and they produce something that's modern and is exciting to recruits, and they have the ability to potentially take a big leap next year. But it's hard to see that with the Cal men. Like we have point guards that struggle to distribute and shoot and turn over the ball often more than they pass, distribute assists, and we don't have any outside shooting for our wings, so we just end up dumping it in or pulling up for twos, long twos, as you say.
I mean, that's why that's why like next year is so weird to me, and this year was so weird to me too. Is a lot of what Mark Fox was saying in post game pressers and preseason stuff was like, yeah, we're gonna have to pass around the ball a lot, play a lot more team ball. But what happened? Jordan Shepard comes in and he takes like close to 30% of all of the shots on offense. Or it's like just thrown into Andre Kelly. It's not modernized at all. He talks about like how the roster was like small when he first came in, and that he finally has the athletes to do it. But he still played out the shortest lineups he possibly could, instead of throwing all these young guys out. And he says, "Oh, it's about a rebuild. Like this is a huge rebuilding situation." Then proceeds to play his grad transfers the most amount of time. Like there's a disconnect between what he's trying to sell to the fans and to recruits versus what we're seeing on the court. And he thinks that we're not basketball savvy enough to know that the things aren't adding up here. Like the only guys he's going to be able to sell like as a grad transfer are guys like Jordan Shepard, right? It's a high volume scorer and at a Power 5 conference. And if they're at a mid major, you can say, all right, yeah, come on in. You're taking all the late game shots. Take as many as you want. The ball's going to be in your hands. There's no one else. And sure, maybe two of those guys like say, okay, we might not win enough games, but maybe I can showcase enough offensive talent to get a call either overseas or maybe to the G League or maybe to the NBA. And that's like the only selling point you have is that one roster spot to be able to do that. But now you don't have that anymore. You don't have, unless someone leaves, and Andre still hasn't said whether he's staying or leaving. If Andre leaves, that leaves one transfer spot open. Mark Fox only has one point guard on the roster in Joel Brown, has not recruited a single point guard to the program since he's been on campus. And we're also lacking a perimeter scorer. And then on top of that, in the Knowlton interview, they're talking about guys that are coming in and they're really expecting highly of the freshmen and up like the guys that are becoming sophomores and juniors to take that next big step, but you don't play them enough minutes to see if they can sink or swim in the Pac-12 in a lost season. Like, that's my biggest worry is next season. Like, let's say the talent does well and we pull off a couple of upsets, and all of a sudden it's like oh yeah, he can do it. He can rebuild this program, and we give him like another 3-year extension. And I think they have 5 scholarship spots to work with for the next season. So, like, this was like that's what I was like when I was doing the math. I was like, this is the perfect year to make a change if we're going to make a change anyways, because it lets the next coach reload into the recruiting class with 5 open scholarships, potentially more if some decided to transfer out to rebuild for this year and then for next year.
And a full year to make the use of that class, because if you fire Mark Fox after next year, you have a coach coming in scrambling to fill a bunch of spots late in the cycle.
Yeah,
which
and who
is
knows
also the
how they pan
situation
out.
Mark Fox inherited and the situation Wyking Jones inherited. And when you have these weird transition classes, it hurts your program. So I hadn't really thought about it in that way before, Rob, but now I am in fact predicting that Mark Fox will be fired at the end of next year, and we'll hire a coach too late, and we'll have another disastrous transition class when we need a non-transition class that will probably keep kneecapping Cal basketball. So it's good to know what we're getting into long term.
To be fair, the difference between when Mark Fox was hired and now is the transfer portal, right? And what the transfer portal offers with the immediate eligibility and so on. So if we did hire a new coach early enough going into next year and we knew who was in the transfer portal and just convince some guys with high enough talent to come in to make an immediate impact difference, like, you could build that roster out drastically differently. But yeah, I mean, the point that you made still stands.
Yeah, I think the thing is we need to be cognizant of what we want in terms of a long-term coaching solution. Like,
we're driven by the search for better. But when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. Leveraging over 140 million qualifications and preferences every day, Indeed's matching engine is constantly learning from your preferences, so the more you use Indeed, the better it gets. Join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Just go to Indeed.com/Blue Wire right now and support our show by saying that you heard about Indeed on this podcast. That's Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed.
Right now we have like a lot of potential candidates we might want. Well, who knows who's going to come up in the next year, but usually the coaches we want are in the mid-major level, but might be a little bit beyond our price range. So among the candidates who we could potentially get at what the athletic department is probably trying to, let's say the salary range is like 1 to 1.5 million a year. That's going to kind of leave us in a place where we can't get the top tier candidates, but we could probably get the second tier candidates. And I guess it's a matter of finding out who would be that best fit. That gets you back into the discussion of the Joe Pasternaks and the Travis DeCures of the world, because those guys are okay. They have good years, they have bad years, but they're affordable, and they're probably more in tune with like West Coast recruiting than Fox or Jones were. Like, what do we think is reasonable given the constraints that the athletic department is putting on the basketball team?
Yeah, it's tough for me to project. Like, going into this season, we ID'd a bunch of guys who were sort of intriguing, and those guys all turned into, like, the guys who ended up being hired in this year's cycle. And so, we're going to have to sort of like reevaluate who's the next up and coming sort of coach. But when you're talking about like from a starting point, you can say like, well, there's Travis DeCure at Montana, Pasternak at Santa Barbara, um, uh, Shante Legans is in the West Coast Conference is probably worth monitoring, and then there's going to be a whole bunch of guys who, come through with like big seasons that are worthy of evaluation. And ultimately, where I fall is, a savvy, creative athletic department is going to be able to find those guys and identify them. I doubt that we have that sort of an athletic department, but maybe we'll hire a better search firm this time around.
I mean, I think that the last point I'll make is like regarding like Gates and Golden, like not. I mean, we might not have made the finances work, but we sure as hell could have played the emotional like and geographical part to our advantage. Like if we had gone after Golden, I don't think of course I don't think we could have paid as much as Florida paid, but at the same time, like we could have been like, hey, we'll give you enough of a pay raise so that you can stay living in the Bay Area. We know you love this place. We know your family loves it here. Like if you want to stay here, like this is the place to be, right? We can offer that to you. Who knows if he would have taken it? I think Connor put out a tweet after Golden was hired at Florida saying like something about it was a missed opportunity because his family and Golden both love the Bay Area. So, I think people underestimate the like the beyond just the financial aspect of it. There are coaches, of course, that will only consider the financial aspect of it, but and then of course, like with Gates, it's home for him, right? This is where he played. This is where he got his first or second coaching job. So like, who knows? Maybe he will come home at some point, but it's going to be a long while before that happens. But I think we've exhausted the conversation about basketball. I don't think anyone wants to hear talk about basketball anymore, and we've talked about it for close to 50 minutes. So,
do we have any questions about hoops from?
Let me check the Twitters real quick. Nah, it's mostly about football.
Wow.
So I say we get into it. All right. Real Cal fans. Let's talk about football. So the first part, Will Craig, Maldonado both have departed the team, according to Coach Wilcox today with his like pre-spring press with the media or press conference with the media. Your guys' thoughts on that? I know most of us already kind of know like this sucks from a depth perspective, especially with Will Craig in the offensive line. Maldonado really hasn't played for the Bears in about 2 years, so it doesn't make much of a difference from a snaps perspective, but still loses depth and experience on that defensive line, especially at tackle. So,
yeah, I mean, I could start with Maldonado just because I think his story is sort of simpler, which is, the classic sort of injuries suck story because he kind of burst on the scene and immediately got playing time as a true freshman on the line, and it seemed like, hey, this is a guy that we can really build around. And then he's been off and on hurt every year since then.
Yep.
And injuries, I think, have robbed him of, finding out what he could have turned into on a football field. And, from a selfish fan perspective, the good news is we've got a lot of interesting guys on the line. I think we'll be fine. But, heart goes out to a guy who had lots of intriguing talent, and injuries have taken that away, and that sucks. And Will Craig is a similar story, a guy who highly coveted recruit, one of the best offensive line recruits we've brought in like the last decade, and injuries have been a constant issue for him as well. The difference between Will Craig's story and Aaron Maldonado's story is we do not have depth at tackle. Cal played 3 guys all season long at tackle last year. One graduated, one is Will Craig, and the other was our one backup tackle, Braden Roym. So we have like one guy and we have no idea who else is going to be contributing at tackle, whether there's like a redshirt freshman last year who's going to have to step in, or if somebody from the interior line is going to have to move outside to tackle. I'm pretty worried about the offensive line, quite frankly.
It's a big year for Angus McClure. I mean, this is basically now his group. And yeah, I mean, I'm concerned. Like, when McClure was at UCLA, his lines got battered and bruised. He was always better known for his defensive line work. And his recruiting. I mean, he's been a great recruiter on both sides, but yeah, his offensive lines have struggled. Now, obviously, he was with Neuheisel for most of that time at UCLA, and that was just a disaster from start to finish. But I mean, the Cal offense hasn't really proven much in the last 5 years, so it's basically the same sort of. There's a lot of points of failure on this offense, and we kind of need them all to be working in concert with a new quarterback and basically the entire offensive skill position revamp. So if we don't have those things up front, it kind of hamstrings any of those plans to take a step forward offensively.
Rob, I don't know if you have any sense, like from hearing from the team, like younger guys who might be in a position to step up. Like I know Ryan Lang was certainly the right size to play tackle, a recruit out of Pittsburgh last year who redshirted. Maybe the staff thinks he can step up. I guess regardless, we know that it's going to be somebody that wasn't really on the radar last year who's going to be playing this year.
Yeah, I mean, there's going to be a lot of position battles on the offensive line, right? Will Craig's out, so that left tackle spot. Matt Tower's gone, so that spot. Ben Coleman and Cindric are probably the only two guys that you are probably penciling in as the starters on the O-line. And that's not even considering the fact that maybe they move around Ben Coleman. So he still might be one of the first names listed, but if you can't find a guy who can play tackle, especially left tackle, that athleticism and size that Ben Coleman gives you at guard, you might have to push out to tackle.
Yeah, that's a real kind of a bummer because Cal's strength last year on the line was on the interior. Ben Coleman was good. Cindric was good. I think Mettauer had some injury issues, but was generally solid. And so you're sort of faced with a tough choice of either moving those guys to tackle and risking losing what made them successful as interior linemen, or bringing on guys who maybe you're not sure whether or not they're ready to take on tackle, which is, anybody can tell you it's a whole lot harder to be a tackle than it is to be an interior lineman, dealing with some of the edge threats that have been in the Pac-12. So tough.
Yeah. I mean, then I think, if we're going to talk about names, I think that people probably aren't talking about now that might be talking about come fall time. The one name that I've consistently heard from people like just around the program and around the football team is not even on campus yet. And that's incoming freshman Siope Vakitani. Like that, that's the consistent name I've heard. Whether it's the film, the off-season work, whatever it is, they feel like if he can get a grasp of the playbook and a little bit of the technique, not even a lot of the technique, just a little bit, they think that his athleticism and his natural ability to play the position could probably vault him into that 2 deep. Whether it becomes a starter or not, I'm not sure. But the way that they're talking about him makes me feel like he might be at least the first offensive lineman off the bench to get some spells. So that's the name I would put on everyone's radar. But once again, he's not on campus yet, so we won't see him until fall. But you asked for a name, there's your name.
Hey, I'll take whatever optimism I can try to scrape together.
I think you're muted, Avi. You muted yourself and then you started talking.
Yeah, I think I remember. Yeah, sorry about that. The good thing for Cal is like their schedule starts pretty soft for the most part. Like I don't think they have outside of Notre Dame. So they have a few weeks to try and put things together.
Notre Dame is soft.
Well, it'll be a low scoring game, right? So hopefully we can be we can eke it out. But I mean, there will be an opportunity for the offensive line to get comfortable with themselves, even if they are pretty inexperienced. But yeah, I mean, I do fear like a repeat of 2018 where we're kind of just eking out these 10-9 games because Wilcox realizes the offensive line isn't protecting at the way he wants them to, so he just is like, all right, let's play my style of ball.
The turtle.
Well, so I'm curious how you two each feel. For my money, I would say that this is by far the most interesting spring practice since Wilcox's very first season. When we were seeing him install his schemes and sort of deciding how to reshape the team in his own image, because this is the first year where we have like widespread position battles across the entire team, which is in part like just bad news because so many players who were key contributors across the board have graduated and we can't rely on them anymore. But it makes for a much more interesting spring practice.
I mean, I think you're right. I think this might be, in terms of floor talent, the highest floor like roster we've had in a while across the board. Like just on the average of all the positions, like like I say this all the time on the podcast, and this is not a knock on the guys that are walk-ons that end up becoming huge time players for us, because you're always going to want some of those. But we're now in that spot where a lot of the starting roles, or even the two deep, are going to be guys that were touted at some point, whether as a 3-star or a 4-star. There's not going to be a lot of guys that fell under the radar, and so on. Like most of these guys are guys that we won recruiting battles with to get them onto campus. So the floor is higher. Whether that increases the competitive advantage we have at those positions, we won't know until kickoff against UC Davis. But at least for now, like, it's going to be really interesting to see, okay, which talent is going to beat out which talent. And that's where the fun is for me. Like, I'm looking at this, and we'll talk about all the position, or some of our most intriguing position groups in a little bit, but particularly like offensively, like I'm looking at the running back group, I'm looking at the quarterback room, I'm looking at the wide receiver room, and even the tight end room, and I'm going, man, we lost a lot, but shoot, some of the guys that are in that room right now that haven't played a lot, they're going to be fun to watch if they're panning out as we think they're going to pan out. So I guess, yeah, that's my thing. What about you, Avi?
It's interesting. We were just talking for 40 minutes about Mark Fox changing like who he is this year. I think Justin Wilcox is in a similar situation where this is the most skilled talent he's ever going to have. Like, I mean, all the guys we had in the past were like great, like role players and did their job, and they were great. They were great for the scheme he wanted to run on offense. But like, we have 3 to 4 really talented running backs. We have 2 to 3 talented wide receivers who are like highly sought after by multiple like blue bloods. I mean, there's talent on this squad, and if they're all healthy, like we can do some pretty interesting things with this offense. But again, it's a matter of how willing is Wilcox to kind of freewheel a little bit more and try to make this team more offensive oriented, because in the past he's kind of oriented toward the defensive identity, and that didn't really change in the first 2 years of Musgrave. So will that philosophy change with a new quarterback and a new group of players who could provide more explosiveness and versatility that we haven't really had the chance to capitalize on the last couple of years because we haven't had that talent, but now it's here. So I mean, this is a chance for him to try something new with in a pretty wide open Pac-12.
I think that makes sense. I think it's kind of that vein of they were trying to limit as many mistakes as they possibly could over the last few years because maybe they knew that they didn't have maybe the athletic advantage over some of these other teams that they were playing against. But like now you don't have that to fall back on because you have all these younger guys that you've recruited in, they're about to be thrown into the fire. There's no upperclassmen that they asked to come back like Elijah and Drayden and all those guys. Like they're all gone. Like and Nico and Trayvon and Kakoa, like they're all gone. There's not a single one you can rely on now. Every single one of those guys that are going to be vying for a bucket load of the snaps, particularly on offense, are guys that have not gotten the bucket load of snaps on offense. But in terms of recruiting profile, we're more highly touted than the guys that were above them. And, if you were safeguarding them from having to play them as a freshman, we'll see if that plan worked out now. So now I think that to boil that all down, the simplest way to say it is we'll now see this year whether it was a scheme issue or whether it was a personnel issue. Like I think that's clear because most of these guys have been with Musgrave now. All of these guys have been with Sermon and that defense. They know the scheme. They should probably know the playbook by heart now, and now they just have to go out and execute. And is the talent going to win out? That's the debate we have, and I just don't know. That's going to be not that I don't know. It's going to be interesting to watch how that unfolds over spring and the fall.
You've had Wendy's nugs dipped in sauce, but have you had them covered in sauce? Wendy's new saucy nugs take the crispy and spicy nugs you love and turn them up to 11. Choose between flavors like buffalo or honey barbecue, garlic parm, or if you're a real heat seeker out there, you can try spicy ghost pepper, only on Wendy's signature spicy nugs. Listen, I'm going to dare you to do it. I dare you. That's 7 delicious ways to try the nugs that you already love. Pick a flavor, grab some extra napkins, and then grab a few more napkins and prepare to nug like you've never nugged before. For a whole new way to nug, it's got to be Wendy's at participating U.S. Wendy's.
Nick, you got anything?
I don't know. Is it time to jump into position group breakdowns?
Let us. Well, I don't want to go through every position group because I feel like that would take forever. But the one position group that everyone is asking about that we should at least talk about to start.
Punter.
Is, of course, the quarter. Where is Jeremiah? Where is J. Mike? Where is Justin Baker, the touchdown maker? God, some of the names we have on this roster are awesome. But we got to talk about quarterbacks, right? We got to talk about that battle probably between Plummer, Milner, and Johnson. Those are the three guys that, will be here. And, there are some other guys like Blake DeBishop and some other guys. But in terms of the profile, those are the three guys that we think will have the best chance as of right now to win the starting quarterback job or even the backup quarterback job. So what are you guys expecting to see out of this? Like, what are you looking for coming out of this spring from that group?
Well, we can start, I suppose, with Jack Plummer just because the dude has played college snaps. So, like, we actually have something that we can lean on in terms of saying, all right, what's the deal with this guy? He's was with Purdue for 3 years. He got snaps all 3 years. He had kind of a solid start to his career, playing a little bit in 2019. He improved in 2020 as a passer. He had kind of a step back, quite frankly, in 2021, which maybe had something to do with his transfer. He got less playing time as the year went along. He had kind of a rough 2-game stretch against Notre Dame and Illinois after a strong start to the season. And I don't know if that's injury related or what the deal is. Honestly, like, it's always tough with these things to sort of pull out what is team factor versus individual player factor. But like if you're looking at the PFF grades and his stats, he's probably a slight downgrade as a passer compared to Chase Garbers, and a big downgrade from Chase Garbers in terms of his mobility and as a runner. And so for a guy who is 3 years into his career, presumably learning a new offense, I sort of lean towards he is who he is at this point, and expecting him to be like a difference maker strikes me as unrealistic. And if he ends up winning the starting job, I imagine he won't be a problem. Like, I don't think he's going to throw a ton of picks or be a disaster or anything. But to me, it would say something a little bit concerning about Cal's quarterback recruiting and development if a quarterback like Jack Plummer comes in as a transfer and immediately wins the job.
Yeah, same basic thoughts. I think the big thing Cal has to face right now is we're kind of thin quarterback recruiting wise right now, because like we did get a quarterback at the very end of last cycle, but it's still unclear like what his skill level is, since I think he came from not one of the more competitive leagues in Florida. So we're gonna it'll be more of a project, I think, unless he is a amazing breakthrough. So we're kind of like, if Plummer wins this job, if we have to be concerned about where we stand pipeline wise, are we going to keep on dipping into the portal every year to get a quarterback? I know that's the way of the world now, and like transfer portal quarterbacks are probably more reliable than high school recruits on the average now at this point. But yeah, I know it's one of those things where Cal can get results every now and then, but it's hard to get like a reliable portal quarterback every year to lead your offense, especially one like Musgraves, which is far more complex and pro style than your average college offense. So it's not easily a plug and play situation. So if someone like Milner or Johnson, who have been here 2 years now, can't like figure out the playbook, it's a twofold issue. You're having trouble recruiting quarterbacks, and is the system too complex for your quarterback to break down? Like Chase Garbers was a better quarterback under Bill Baldwin at the end of his tenure than he was at the end of Musgrave's tenure. Like he wasn't like, an NFL starter, but he was definitely more reliable and consistent than he was the first 6 weeks of the season. So that leads you into another situation where you're thinking about, is this the right offensive play caller? And is Wilcox good at evaluating who should be helming the offense? Those are a lot of philosophical questions that we have to delve deep into, but I think this quarterback decision could play into all of those things.
And on the flip side, it's like I gave the reason why it's concerning reflection of the health of your offense if a transfer quarterback with an iffy track record takes the starting job. So the guy you want to reflect good health in your quarterback room is you want Kai Milner to win the battle, because he's a high 3-star, nearly 4-star consensus recruit with 5 Pac-12 offers and 11 high major offers. The guy that your new offensive coordinator specifically went after and got to, be his quarterback of the future at some point, presumably. If he was the guy that ended up winning the job, you would say, hey, that's normal process for a college offense to ID and develop that guy so that he's ready to start by this point in his career if called upon. And we'll start finding out during spring practice whether or not he's ready.
It's more exciting if Milner is the guy, because then you have someone for 2 to 3 years who can like really leapfrog the program. Like everything I've heard is that Milner is that dude, and just like someone who everyone is wowed in his practices and has the natural arm talent, has the skill set to be like the most athletic quarterback we could potentially have under the system. And if you pair that with all the other athletes we have, suddenly we have an offense that's exciting and will bring fans back and will get everyone super stoked to go to Memorial Stadium every weekend. But if you have Plummer, who, I mean, if he's good, then we'll be rooting for him, but it's not going to excite anyone. It's just kind of more of the same, kind of like 20-17 type of football. But it can work if it wins games. Then all for it. Whoever's playing the best, as usual, as coach would say.
After all that, Zach Johnson's going to win the battle now, isn't he?
Yeah. Yeah, we dissed Zach so much. He was first on the depth chart, right?
Yeah, no, it's worth mentioning. He'd prove us eggheads wrong.
This is true. All right. Yeah, I think we're all on the same page in terms of quarterback. I think we all can kind of agree because we talked about Will Craig. Our biggest worry position group is probably the offensive line at this point. So yeah, I think we're all nodding. I think we're all in
At
agreement.
tackle specifically, like
Yeah.
I think if we kept the guys who played on the interior of the line in the interior, I wouldn't be worried about those positions specifically. But we might not be able to because it's just not clear. Like what was kind of scary about last year is Cal's tackle depth chart was Will Craig and Valentino Del Toso as the starters and Roym as the only backup for both positions. There was never anybody else listed on the depth chart.
Yeah.
So, like, luckily, Cal made it through the season without needing to call on anybody else. But it's sort of like, but who's left? Like, who on the roster does the coaching staff think can play tackle? I kind of assumed that with the Will Craig's injury history with Del Toso graduating, that Cal might really go hard after a tackle in the portal. To the best of my knowledge, we haven't brought anybody in. Please, if I'm missing something, correct me. But so the implication is that we're going to be filling these spots with players on the roster. Maybe that guy exists. I just don't know who it is.
Yeah, I think with the offensive line, we're going to have to rely on that 2020 class. Someone's going to have to break through. I'm going to just quickly look through the names like Lang,
Yemtegard,
Bastian Sweeney. Like they're all on the depth chart, like the second and third spots. And yeah, those are the guys. One of those guys is going to be on the depth chart, regardless of whether their talent level, because no one else is there. It's possible we might go back to the portal after spring when some O-linemen don't win jobs at top programs. But yeah, it's seeming like these are the guys we have. So I do wonder if this kind of hampers what we do with our tight ends this year. If we'll start running more max protect and keeping guys back to block because that's where we need them to be. And then we have to just use like our wide receivers as our primary vertical weapons with maybe some stuff from the running backs as well. But yeah, it does it does put more stress on our skill wide receivers to really stretch the field and force teams to play their linebackers and everyone on the backside further back. Because if they don't do that, then we're going to be getting a lot of rush.
It's situations like these when you start to realize the appeal of the Mike Leach pure air raid offense. Hey, offensive lineman, all you need to learn how to do is pass block, and also you don't need to pass block for that long because the ball is going to be out in 3 seconds.
Just push them, and then just wait.
Yeah, it really solves a lot of challenges with one of the tougher position groups to build successfully.
Yeah, let's not talk about the other side. Although I guess Leach had good defenses. We never were able to.
Well, he had him with Grinch, sure.
Yeah,
but, Grinch is at a place where he can recruit a lot better talent now. So, anywho, yeah, I think we're all on the same page with that. But moving on, What do you think the deepest position group is? Like the one where we have so much talent there that it's not too much of a worry.
Oh, I mean, secondary.
I think that's ultimately the correct answer.
Oh, really? Wow, different picks than I have.
You could buy me an argument for the defensive line with Brett Johnson back, but I'm ultimately going to lean towards the secondary, partly because Daniel Craig is coming back. If Craig left after what
Are you talking about 007 or
I think he's talking about
Which-
Daniel Scott.
Daniel Scott, Will Craig,
we do have a Craig
Will Scott,
Woodson in the
God knows.
secondary.
There's a
But yes.
significant amount of depth with that unit where we have transfers from Power 5 programs who are probably not even going to see the field. Like, I don't think Ray Woody has seen like a lot of snaps, and he probably might not see a lot this year because of Scott and Woodson. But I mean, we've always had solid secondaries. It's been the front seven where we've had more of our depth issues. But I mean, we have basically two guys who are, I wouldn't say going to be draft worthy, but going to be pretty close in Scott and Lumagia. And then Gamble and Woodson are just solid guys. Like they've been pretty productive when they've gotten to see the field.
I mean, you haven't even mentioned Isaiah Young, who came on towards
Right.
the end of the second half of last season too.
Yeah, we have so many options to play nickel and dime formations with the unit we have. And there's really not that many good offenses in the Pac-12 this year. So they're going to have a pretty solid time to kind of like do what they want to. So if they just get a little bit of pass rush up front, they could be pretty takerish this season.
Yeah. Or mentioning guys like Miles Williams, who flashed in limited action last year at safety and might get more playing time. Caleb Higgins, who a lot of the recruiting experts are really high on. So, yeah, there are a lot of potential solutions in secondary, and we're bringing back guys who already have proven it on the field and to a pretty good degree.
I mean, they do say that it's the hardest position to play on the football field. So,
Rob, was your answer going to be linebacker?
My answer was inside linebacker. I mean, yeah, I mean, you guys are all nodding, so like, I'm not gonna have to sell you too hard on it. Like, we have basically a 2 deep plus one in terms of the depth. Like, we have guys that have gotten a bunch of the snaps over the last 2 years. ISF had a little bit of a sophomore slump, but he looked like he was getting back into form towards the end of last season. Just because he did have an injury like halfway through fall camp, so who knows like when he was fully recovered and if he never got into game shape. Trey Pastor looked like he was getting more comfortable playing inside than he after making that switch from safety. And then you got the two guys behind him in Nate Rachenna, who seemingly plays coverage like a defensive back, but is that inside linebacker. Like, he has an incredible knack for like where the ball is going to be and to like high point it. And then Oladejo, like, I don't know where Oladejo, he might actually move outside. But, you know, even if he stays inside, like that size is, you know, can't teach size. And then the last name, like, we forget, like, from last fall is Anselatos, who was arguably the best inside linebacker in fall camp prior to that injury. So it'll be interesting to see if he can get back to that level. And then, of course, Jackson Sherman. Is it Jackson Sherman? Did I get that name right? There's so many Shermans. I think it's
the
Jackson
one.
Sherman. Jackson Sherman's the one. The leading tackler for UW last season. And now he's with us, like, playing inside linebacker. So yeah, they could afford to move Oladejo outside if they really want his size and length there, because you brought in a guy like Jackson and you're seeing Anselatos recover from that injury too. So there's so much proven talent there.
We haven't mentioned Trey Pastor.
Yeah. So that's what I mean. There's so much proven talent and enough experience and snaps in meaningful games that it's not just flashes. It's like you have stats. and you have like legitimate PFF grades if you wanted to go that route.
My one question there, well, it's sort of, I guess, a matter of what you maybe value more, because what the secondary has maybe is um, really high level starters, but some more questions at the backup positions for guys who maybe haven't seen a ton of the field. With inside linebacker, you have a ton of guys who have gotten playing time because of various injuries and rotations, and they're all solid. And what will be the job of the coaches to figure out is who's ready, if anybody, to take that next step from solid to like game changer,
Uh-huh.
or alternatively, who can maintain that solid performance if they're moved to outside linebacker, which, in Wilcox's defense, they're asked to do different things, and so who knows if that skill set will transition, because yeah, if we were to talk about shallowest position, unfortunately, outside linebacker would be in the conversation there right now.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing with the outside linebacker, because I think it has the most raw talent. Like, there are
Mhm.
3 freshmen who I could see playing 3 to 4 years at Cal, in Derek Wilkins and Caleb Elarmzor and Patrick Hisataki. Like, those guys are all ready, and they're all going to probably get snaps this year. But they might not be ready to take that full level. So if they like pan out, then suddenly this Cal defense goes from um, pretty solid to monstrous, which I'm pretty excited about. But if they're not ready, then yeah, some of those inside guys are probably going to have to spend some time on the outside, and then the inside sort of strength kind of dilutes a bit, and it's not quite as strong a unit. And you have some guys who are playing out of position, and then suddenly the defense isn't quite as um, effective in rushing the passer and doing like intermediate pass coverage routes and breaking stuff up the way we'd like them to. But yeah, I mean, the OLB, like the edge outside linebacker position, has like the highest floor, but also the lowest ceiling, I think, on the defense.
You mean the highest ceiling but the lowest floor, right?
Sure. That sounds better. I'm still
I think
thinking.
you're right.
I'm still thinking of Mark Fox. Raise the ceiling.
Raise the floor. Well, I mean that was my next thing that I wanted to ask you guys. Like, which position group do you think has the highest ceiling? And this
Ceiling.
is, I mean, we've talked so much about the defense. Like, we haven't even talked about the offense outside of quarterback and offensive line. But like on the entire team, I mean, should we go entire team or should we go on both sides of like one side of the ball?
I mean, I still think it would be defense, because we still have not seen like an elite offensive unit with Justin Wilcox, and I'm not,
Mm-hmm.
even with the talent we have on that side, I'm pretty bearish, no pun intended, on
Yuck, 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 yuck.
no
Hey,
pun.
hey, Avi.
Yeah, it would be stunning to see like the guy that suddenly we break out like a top 25 offense. So I would probably go, in terms of highest ceiling, our defensive ends with Xavier Carlton and Brett Johnson.
Good God.
Like Carlton, I mean, he didn't crack the Utah roster, but I'm pretty sure he would be starting in any other Pac-12 roster, so he is ready and willing. And then, I mean, we haven't seen Brett in almost a year and a half, so those are 2 like really talented guys who can, if they can get the pressure on the edge on their own, then suddenly this defense is just explosive in so many ways. Like, do way more you can do way more packages with the outside linebackers. You can run more nickel blitzes because the DNs are occupying pressure up front, and then you can have the inside linebackers crash more. And yeah, it gets more exciting if you have edge rush on the defensive end side with that 3-4. But yeah, I think with Johnson, Carlton, and then Saunders and Roberts are capable guys, and Darius Long has seen time, and yeah, Derek Wilkins, it might be his year too.
That's different from my pick. I think for me, the highest ceiling, I guess my pick was before the offensive line, like with the Will Craig news came out, but I think the highest ceiling for me is at running back. I think it's probably the most athletic running back room we've seen, like raw athleticism wise, on paper, uh, in the last, I don't know, I dare say like 7 years, like just from top to bottom. Like we have four guys in there right now that could probably end up being the starter. Like Damian Moore returns, like despite some of the issues he had last year. You have Chris Street, you have DeCarlos Brooks. Like there are so many guys in there that can play crazy, crazy fast and play very different styles of running too. We haven't had that home run hitter, right? We haven't had that guy that when we just get solid blocking on one gap and he is through that hole and he is to the end zone. Like we haven't had that guy, and I don't know if that's a once again was it a scheme issue or was it an experience and we're trying to limit the number of like mistakes. But like Damian Moore kind of showcased that. Remember that Stanford run that you know that got pulled back, the big game in 2020. Like that, those were the moments where we kind of saw like, oh, this is the next generation of Cal running backs, good Cal running backs that we've had. But like you saw Chris Street do that a bunch of times, breaking tackles last year. DeCarlos Brooks got a few snaps where we saw that flash. And then you look at their high school tape and you look at the like what they did in high school in terms of statistics, and you're like, damn, like if they can replicate just some of that, like we have a three-headed monster at running back where they all do different things and they're all ridiculously effective. So that's my hope, is that just one of them takes that like next step and just is just out of this world, gives us that home run threat at running back.
I
Yeah,
think that's a fair point.
Yeah, I think. Oh, sorry.
Go
Go
ahead,
ahead.
Abby.
Nick. Oh, okay. Yeah, I think with running back, it's they're really talented. Like I have no doubt. Like Moore is, if he's healthy, he is probably the most complete back we've had in nearly a decade. And then Street has shown flashes. Brooks has shown flashes. I guess where I'm kind of reluctant to say that they're like ceiling raisers is they haven't really produced much. Like, and they haven't been able to overtake guys on the depth chart who are talented, like Dancy and Brooks, but not really game changers. Um, so I'm actually interested in Ashton Stredick because he seems to continue to get a lot of buzz to be like that Patrick Laird type who kind of breaks through and just kind of surpasses everyone. And then Jaden Ott, who I think is
Yep.
playing this
Have you
spring.
talked about Jaden Ott? Yeah, he is.
So those are seeing those new faces is interesting because I think with the way we play football under Wilcox, he really values ball security, blocking, and maintaining that sort of versatility to be a pass catcher as well. So it kind of reduces like the focus on just being like super explosive, one touch and gone. Um, I'm hoping he's more willing to spread the wealth with more weapons to choose from, and definitely more skilled players. But yeah, it's still like a concern with no certainty as to how good the offensive line is and where the running backs kind of stand in terms of like the current troop.
Yeah, I'll admit that I sometimes like err too far on the side of the analytical like running backs don't I don't want to say don't matter, but are like the least important position group because it's so blocking dependent. And you saw that in Cal's PFF numbers this year, where the running backs consistently graded out really highly in terms of like hitting the right hole, breaking a few tackles, falling forward, all those things that running backs can control. And it's just that running backs can't control enough that their excellence was enough by itself. Like Cal's blocking just wasn't consistent enough to do more than that. Um, and I worry that that's ultimately going to be the story next year, is that the running backs all grade out really well if you like dive into the tape, but it's not going to matter because the line might not be ready to really pave the way for them. And hopefully they're so brilliant that they stand out anyway. But I guess we'll start to get a sense of that in the next few weeks.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the big thing with that group is that just like we were talking about, like Angus McClure, like Angus McClure and Aristotle Thompson should be tied at the hip right now because like this is like a real make or break year for both of them. Like Aristotle Thompson like didn't recruit well when he first got here, but then that has picked up significantly over the last 2 cycles. And now there's no logjam at the front. There's no Chris Brown. There's no Marcel Dancy. There's no more experience up there. Like now it's your guys that you can pick and choose to play who you want. And Angus McClure's guys are going to have to block for these guys in order for them to see the fruits of those recruiting battle wins. So like, yeah, those two groups like need to play extremely well together. So yeah, I think Nick, you're right. I mean, we don't always want to see running backs have to make something out of nothing. But if we can consistently see them hitting the right holes, I think that's coaching. All those little tendency things, that's coaching. But ultimately, that big play is the execution of the scheme and getting the 4 or 5 yards per carry type of games.
The running backs have been playing better, I will say. I just think, like in general, the Cal offensive line has not performed very well since even with Gradewood. Like they've struggled a lot in either one aspect or both aspects. I think with Mus with sorry, not Musgrave, with McClure, they've struggled a lot with the pass blocking side of things far more. Um, and with Gradewood, there was just a lot of struggle in general. And I think if we're thinking about offensive philosophy this season, we're either breaking in a new quarterback or who's either inexperienced or overexperienced. It'll be interesting to see what philosophy we take as a team. Like we've tried to opt toward balance, where we're like passing the ball X amount of times and running the ball X amount of times, and sometimes to Nick's chagrin, we're passing it the exact situation that we all predict in the stands. um, Hopefully, we'll be able to be a bit more variable with that with a new quarterback. But I think Nick, probably one thing you're concerned about is if we have Plummer out there, we'll probably be ampling towards the same tendencies that we've had the last couple seasons.
Yeah, I mean, what was frustrating at times for the Cal offense last year, in some other years under Wilcox, is the feeling that um, they weren't necessarily maximizing the talent they had, and or like deploying them in the way that would be ideal to match their skill sets, that sort of a thing. I mean, this year, there's just so much uh, uh, turnover on the roster. Like, I said basically that we played 15 players meaningful snaps on offense last year, which was a reflection of how veteran the offense was and also how healthy the offense was, that we didn't have to have backups taking snaps. After all the graduations and transfer portal departures and injury retirements, we have 2 interior linemen and a running back returning. That's it. So it's going to be a lot harder for us to evaluate the offense in terms of like maximizing talent and maximizing skill set, because we haven't seen most of these guys play. So it's going to be a real learning experience for us who are trying to like analyze and understand this team. I'm going in mostly dark.
Yeah, so Rob, you might be right by default because I think we might be running way more than at least to start the season as we try and figure out who is really the steward of the offense.
I don't always want to be right, but sure. In this case, I will take it. Gents, we've been talking for a little over an hour and a half. I don't want to keep you on for too much longer, but we have 3 questions from the fans on Twitter. I'm going to skip over it kind of if we've already kind of talked about it, but we'll start at the top. We got at Rhodes Road. He says, "How do you see the competition for QB1 unfolding between now and Davis? Is there someone already penciled in, or is it more of an open competition?" I'll answer that. I think it'll be an I think it is an open competition. I severely doubt, unless someone blows everyone else out of the water, that they'll name a QB1 at the end of spring ball. That'll carry on into at least the first 2 weeks of fall camp. And we probably won't know, just because we know Coach Wilcox's MO in a little bit of gamesmanship and forcing the other team to do even just a little bit more work. So yeah, we might not have a starting quarterback named until game day or even the week of.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I'll even go so far as to say that I think there have been situations where everybody could reasonably guess as to what decision the coaches were going to make, but they didn't say it because of gamesmanship or whatever. I think this year they won't say it, and I think they'll be being honest about it.
I think you're going to see a lot of or on the depth chart.
And like honest ors where they really don't know the answer.
But I also could see a situation like, I'm trying to think, when was the last time we had quarterbacks flip back and forth? It was it was the McElwain season.
2018?
Yeah.
2017? No, 2017. Because that was the Ross Bowers UNC. Oh, no.
That was 2018.
At UNC, right? 2018. 2018 was Ross Bowers here against UNC. And then afterwards, we saw 4 different quarterbacks.
Garbers, McElwain. Who was the fourth?
Forrest.
Oh, Forrest. Okay, how can I forget?
Yeah.
But yeah, I think we could see a situation where quarterbacks go back and forth because no one distinguishes themselves. And yeah, we could just see like a situation where we just go with the proven quarterback for a while, or we try out the young quarterback depending on the opponent. I am hopeful that Milner gets it, just because it would be nice to see him break through at the beginning. But I'm not going to root for anyone other than who is playing the best. So Plummer will probably be the favorite just because of the reps and the experience, but I don't expect him to be clear heads and shoulders above everyone else.
All right. We'll move on to the last 2 questions. The offense was largely this is from John Clemens on Twitter. The offense was largely dependent on timely chase runs last year. What's the biggest change that would help offset that this year? Or is the answer simply another quarterback who can run?
Yeah, that's something that worries me as well, just because, for the better part of the entire Garber's tenure, you could argue that Garber's scrambles, whether designed or improvised, were the most efficient plays that Cal ran, and it bailed out a lot of problems that the offense had otherwise. And they're gonna have to find something else, and I would ideally you would say that it would either be discovering a more consistent running game, or unlocking the big play potential from Cal's talented younger wide receivers who haven't had a chance to play yet. We call him the touchdown maker, but he hasn't had the opportunity to make any touchdowns yet. Of course, all that both of those answers sort of depend on an offensive line being able to either pass protect or run block. So, it always comes back to the trenches in the end, doesn't it?
I think one of the things with Garber's that we obviously love the scrambling and all the hustle that he put into a lot of his production, is that it kind of masks the fact that he had trouble reading the field and making the proper deep throws or intermediate routes. Like, we missed a lot of, if you watch some of the tape from Wazoo and Oregon and all the games that were winnable but just fell out of reach, there were times when players were open and Garbers just couldn't see them or just missed them. And he made up for that by scrambling a lot and getting first downs and making something out of nothing. So I think one thing that hopefully with Milner and Plumner is we have two guys who are more able to complete downfield passes. Plummer is definitely taller, definitely will be able to see the pocket more and be able to view the field if he kind of recovers from his Purdue slump to be able to iron out some of those throws further down. And then Milner obviously is just an athlete who, if he has the playbook down, should be able to produce and at a higher level than Garbage did from the pocket, or at the very least replicate his scrambling ability. So yeah, I think it's just a matter of like having a quarterback who can kind of see the field, read the field better, get like deep plays. Like we have struggled with explosiveness for the last 5 years. We need to have more explosive plays, whether it's from the run game or from the pass game, and hopefully a better quarterback or more explosive running backs can do that.
All right, last one. This is a pretty general one, though. What do you expect from the Cal football team this year? And what do you want to see?
I expect 6-6 plus or minus a game, and I hope for a winning Pac-12 record.
Yeah, I think this is a season where we could actually really like go up or down, and it probably will just even out to 6-6 again. But like we have the capacity to be bad, we have the capacity to be good if everything comes together, or we could just be the same team we've always been, where we just kind of come back to the median. This team is not going to win the Pac-12. I'm just going to make that prediction right now. There's a lot of young guys, a lot of players who haven't seen the field in a while or are just starting to see the field. This is a transitionary team for a lot of the units. If we win the Pac-12, I would be stunned. If we get even close to winning the Pac-12 or competing for it, I'd be stunned. It would be beyond my wildest dreams to have that happen, but it's just a lot of guys in new positions and new places that don't really lend themselves to getting to that place. The Pac-12 is wide open, but I mean Cal is basically the same place as like 7 other teams. So we're far away from competing with Oregon, or I guess I'm not even sure who second is right now, but sorry, Utah. Utah's the Pac-12 champion. So Utah and Oregon, like those are the two standard bearers, and we're still quite a ways from competing with them. So still in the middle.
If you were to ask me to answer that question a little bit more seriously, I guess what I'd say is I think we're going to sort of revert back to some of the early Wilcox years, where I don't know if the defense will be quite as good as the Evan Weaver-led units that kept Cal afloat when the offense was one of the worst offenses in the Power Five. But I think that like that sort of dynamic might return this year, with the offense turning over so much of its personnel and being so young, and with so many question marks at the two most important positions on the line. But conversely, I think there's real excitement on the defensive side. And so if you were to ask me like to concoct a scenario where Cal overachieves, it's that the defense is as good as any other of the best of Wilcox's defense, and the offense finds just enough that we win a lot of gross games.
Yeah, that's the formula for success I'm seeing this year, and it's definitely possible. Like the defense, there's a lot of defensive depth. This is the deepest defense I think Cal has had. Like that 2018 team was built on, I think, like a great secondary and amazing linebacker play and really solid defensive line. This unit, the defensive line is good at the top and then kind of tapers off afterwards, and the linebackers should be just as strong as 2018 depth wise. And then the secondary it's not as good as that unit, but the starters should be solid. So yeah, I mean, if we have 2 or 3 of the young freshmen, the red shirts like step up, and like contribute, then that is a formula for a really, really good defense. And then suddenly every game is winnable. The flip side, again, is who knows what's going to happen with the offense, and particularly how are we going to grind. We're going to probably lose some games we shouldn't, which is always frustrating and always seems to happen. Like, I'm already circling Arizona and just like dreading it with every fiber of my being. But yeah, I mean, the Notre Dame game is going to be tough, and thankfully we avoid Utah. But I think, yeah, there's still just 4 or 5 games that are going to be pretty droppable, and then 2 more we're going to have to probably coin flip, and then another 4 that we're going to have to coin flip. So we'll see. It'll be an exciting season, but I don't want to build up expectations for anyone.
I think that's fair, but I also think that's a wrap, folks.
Rob, you can give us your pick.
For what? No, you'll hear my picks later. You'll hear my picks later down the line. You guys aren't always on this pod, so it doesn't matter. This is you'll hear me and Andy talking about our picks all year long, up until the start of the Davis game. So, but that's it for us on the Golden Bear Cast. Once again, we're at Golden Bear Cast on Twitter. You can find us everywhere on all of your podcast services. And these guys are Nick Krantz and Avi Kanad, both part of Right for California, as am I. You can find out all our written stuff at rightforcalifornia.com. Thanks again, gents. As always, go Bears. Go
We're driven by the search for better. But when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. Leveraging over 140 million qualifications and preferences every day, Indeed's matching engine is constantly learning from your preferences, so the more you use Indeed, the better it gets. Join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Just go to Indeed.com/Blue Wire right now and support our show by saying that you heard about Indeed on this podcast. That's Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed.